start the PowerPoint.
No.
Oh, okay. So we can start.
Yeah. No, that's fine. Okay, that's fine. Oh, we didn't do this? Okay, that's fine. All right, so, but before we do that, anyway, I want to go back because when we were talking about the, girls, when we were talking about the graphic organizer and the Egyptians and the Chinese and the Greeks and the Romans, we were talking about Hippocrates, who did lots of, observation on the outside of the body. Remember, they couldn't dissect the body, they couldn't cut into it because that was against their culture. But remember, it said in the book that he made the Hippocratic Oath, which is an oath that doctors take to heal and not hurt. And although when he did it, it was very long and difficult to understand, so I found a very short, easy, modern language form of the Hippocratic Oath, which is going to go in it's the first thing in your portfolio, because I want it something that you always have, that you understand. This is what the oath that if you go to medical school, when you graduate, this is the oath that you will take. And I want to let's look at what all that entails so that you understand what you are basically promising to do. This is what you are promising to do as a physician. Now, everybody that goes into the medical community doesn't take this oath. It's only for doctors. Does everybody have it? Where are they? Who's got them right here? Sure, you cannot have all of them. Trying to keep them all. All right, yes, dear.
Wait, so does that mean like a nurse and a physical therapist don't have to take it?
Nurses have a different oath.
They have to.
Different oath.
For the oath, you have to memorize it?
No, you read it. All right, so this is, again, the modern day version, because when he wrote it, first of all, it was in Greek, and it was very wordy. It was kind of like, back when we only had like the King James Version of the Bible, and it's very hard to read, and now we have like tons of modern translations. That's kind of what this is. And I did recognize when I was looking for a real easy to understand one, that a lot of colleges, medical schools, have kind of revised it their own way. And this is just one that I found that was really easy to understand. It says, I do solemnly vow, and it is an oath, so what you're doing is promising, to that which I value and hold most dear, that I will honor the profession of medicine, be just and generous to its members, and help sustain them in their service of humanity. So what they're basically saying is they promise to uphold the profession of medicine. And everybody who is involved in the healthcare field, that they will basically support them. That's what it's saying. That just as I have learned from those who precede me, so will I instruct those who follow me in science and the art of medicine. So like I've learned from all these people, and now I will teach those who are coming behind me. It isn't just a process, okay, I know what I've learned and I'm going to practice medicine and that's all I'm going to do. That's not what you do in medicine. You have to, that's why people do, 5 years of residency? They work under an experienced doctor so that doctor can teach them the knowledge that they have. You're not going to learn everything from a book in school. You're not. So you have to be under the care of another doctor who's going to teach you what they know. That I will recognize the limits of my knowledge. What is that automatically saying right there? They don't know everything. They don't know everything. They admit they don't know everything. And pursue lifelong learning to better care for the sick and to prevent illness. Guys, just because, and you may go through, I don't know, by the time you finish a residency and actually get your license, you may have 8 extra years of college before you do that. After that, if you think you're done, you're in for a rude awakening. I've been teaching 28 years. And as an educator, every year, every 5 years, I have to renew my certificate. And to do that, I have to go to class. I have to take classes. I have to constantly do professional development. Everybody does. If you're a dental hygienist, just because you have your degree and you have a job as a dental hygienist, every year, you have to take classes. Why? Why? And it doesn't. I don't care if you sell insurance. Same thing applies. Why? Why do you continually have to do education, Alyssa?
Because there's new stuff that comes out every year.
All the time. All the time. New laws, new procedures, new technology, new everything. You're not going to stop learning, ever. That I will seek the counsel of others when they are more expert, so as to fulfill my obligation to those who are entrusted in my care. I will seek the counsel of others who are most expert. Meaning what? Meaning what?
They have the strongest base of knowledge.
Yeah, somebody who has a stronger base of knowledge, I'll seek out their counsel. What do you think about this? What should I do? What is the best way to proceed with this illness? Absolutely. That I will not withdraw from my patients in their time of need. Meaning what? I will not withdraw from my patients. Give up. Well, give up or say, I'm done. I can't work with you anymore. And guys, sometimes people who are really sick can be really, really mean and nasty. And sometimes you probably do like want to throw a book at them. Or just say, I'm done, get you another doctor. And you know, most of the time that's too difficult to do. That I will lead my life and practice my art with integrity and honor. Integrity means what?
When no one's looking.
Say it again.
When no one's looking.
No. Integrity. What's integrity? Pride, honesty, high moral standards and ethics. Yes. Using my power wisely. Doctors have a lot of power, and they can use it for good or for evil. Basically, it's the whole use your power for good and not evil thing. That whatsoever I shall see or hear in the lives of my patient that is not fitting to be spoken, I will keep in confidence. This is huge. I cannot express to you enough how important it is that you start now practicing confidentiality. Because if you in the medical field tell something, repeat something, show someone something that is supposed to be confidential, you can not only lose your job, lose your license. So it's not like they're going to fire you from that doctor's office. You'll just go get another one. No, you won't. Because they'll pull your license and you'll never work in the medical field again. It isn't worth it. And I got to tell you that keeping a secret is something that you do as you form a habit. Okay? And I got to tell you that I think that social media probably has been the downfall in that, because somebody tells somebody something and says, I really wish you wouldn't tell anybody this. Could we just keep this between ourselves? And the first thing you do is get on social media and put it out to the whole world. Why are you going to do that? Now's the time to start practicing. If somebody tells you something and asks you to keep it in confidence, you need to start practicing doing just that. Because if you can't do it now, you won't do it then. Carl?
What if, like, because you said, like, if the doctor doesn't know, like, the symptom or something, and they put it, like, on, like, that online thing for other doctors to see, like, do they not put the patient's name on
That
it?
is correct. They'll say, I have a 39-year-old female. These are the symptoms. That could be anybody. That could be anybody. So, yes. And it's not going out on the whole World Wide Web like on YouTube. It's going to a system connected just to medical professionals, and that's all.
Okay.
Yeah, that's huge. And then he goes on to say that into whatever house I shall enter, it shall be for the good of the sick. Well, that was back when they used to make house calls. They used to go to people's house if they were sick. We don't do that now. But you could translate that into whatever hospital room I go into. It'll be for the good of the sick, not to harm. That I will maintain this sacred trust, holding myself far aloof from wrong, from corrupting, from the tempting of others to vice. Basically what that is saying is, I'm going to hold myself to a higher standard than everybody else, being honest, being truthful, being careful, and I'm going to hold everybody around me to that same standard of honesty and integrity. Because I got to tell you, unfortunately, in the medical field, let's just face it, people have access to drugs. And though those drugs are locked up, some people have keys to those, cabinets or wherever, and they have easy access to them. They could get them and take them. But if what it's saying here is, if I see somebody doing something that is against everything that they believe in, they're going to be held accountable. I'm going to call them out. And that's what should happen. You shouldn't turn your head and say, that's none of my business. It is your business. That's part of this oath, is to hold everybody that's in the healthcare profession to a higher standard. And that's why, guys, being a part of the medical academy, you're going to be held to a higher standard with behavior, with disciplines, with grades, with integrity and honesty. Like, you better not ever even consider cheating, getting caught cheating, taking pictures of a test that you shouldn't do, ever. Because you'll be out of this academy and you'll just be a regular. We're going to hold you to a higher standard for 4 years as long as you're a member of this academy. Because you should be. You're going into a medical field where you're going to be held to a higher standard. Isn't that what you want for your doctor to be? You know, you don't want him to be a liar. You don't want him to be on drugs, do you? You want them to a higher standard. Well, that's going to be you one day. Doesn't matter what area that you go into. That above all else, I will serve the highest interest of my patients through practice of my science and my art. So patients first. Their needs are going to come first. I will be an advocate for patients in need and strive for justice in the care of the sick. In other words, if you see somebody who's not giving a patient the very best care, an advocate is somebody who stands up for somebody else. If you have a patient that you've done everything for in the hospital and they need to go to a nursing home, you got to help them get into a nursing home. And if they're in that nursing home, you got to make sure that they're having the best possible care and that they're not being neglected. If they're going home with family members, you make sure that they've got family members that are going to take care of them. It is your job to advocate, to stand up for your patients. And then look what it says. I now turn to my calling. In other words, I'm about to start my practice, promising to preserve its finest tradition with the regard of a long experience in the joy of healing. I make this vow freely and upon my honor. So that is your promise when you graduate from medical school, that these are the things that you're going to do. Somebody asked me last period, what if somebody doesn't do it? What if somebody breaks the vow that they take upon their graduation from medical school? I can't answer that question. I can't answer it. I'm sure people do. I'm sure that doctors at times take medications that they probably shouldn't take, just probably to stay awake to do the surgery. Or, maybe, I don't know, people who do abortions, which is hurting, not healing. I'm just saying, I don't know what happens in those cases. If it's something that's illegal and they get caught, they're going to lose their license, they're going to jail. That I know. But as far as, some of this stuff is kind of abstract and it's hard to know what would happen to them if they break it. Nobody's perfect. Nobody can uphold this all the time, as much as we would like to think that they could. Any questions about the Hippocratic Oath? And if you think about it, that was way back in the time of the early Greeks that Hippocrates wrote this. That's pretty intense for way back then. I would think if somebody wrote it now, yeah. But for way back then, for somebody to have enough ingenuity to write all this, that this is what a doctor should do, they're pretty smart. And he was smart. All right, so you're going to keep that in your portfolio. Yep. Can you possibly wait? Okay. All right, so you may start these notes on the back of your graphic organizer if you would like to. It doesn't matter to me. Again, we are continuing with history. And we're going to start, and by the way, just so you know, I am recording this. Everything that's said, as well as the PowerPoint. If I had a video clip, it would be recorded as well. I think I told you this. If you are absent, if it is this kind of a lesson and it's recorded, I'm going to put a link to my YouTube channel, which is a private channel. The only thing on there are my lessons. And I'll put a link on Edmodo. When you go to it, it'll take you directly there. You'll just look at the date. Like if you were absent today and you come back tomorrow, or you look on it tonight, because it'll be on there tonight. It takes a little while for it to load. So by the time I get home and load it, it may be, 8 o'clock tonight before that happens. But if you're absent, check it. Once you go to the link, I would suggest that you save the link so that every time you need to go to it, you don't have to go back to Edmodo, get the link. So that you can just click on it and there you are, okay? Or subscribe to it. There's a little place on the side that you can subscribe to the link, and that'll make it easier as well. And so also, not that you're going to have a test on this chapter, but other chapters, the night that you're going to study for it, go back and review. Look at the PowerPoint again, listen to what was said. It's a great way to review. So you really by doing this, you're pretty much without excuse as far as, well, I wasn't there. I don't know what all that means. Did you look at the recording on YouTube? No. Whose fault is that? Not mine. I mean, there's no one in this school that can give you a better opportunity for review and for making up what you missed than this, because it's going to be just like being there. Everything I'm saying right now is being recorded. It's magic. It's magic. It's being recorded, and I can download it, and you have access to hear every single thing that was said in class. Now, if it's a day, like, quite frankly, tomorrow, you're going to just be doing a worksheet, and there's nothing to record. So in a case like that, it's not going to be on there. But anything that we do like this will be loaded on YouTube, and you can go straight to it. Yes?
Will PowerPoints themselves be uploaded to
Yeah.
the modem?
Yes? No, not Ted Moto. They'll be recorded on here, on YouTube.
Okay.
Everything you see up here will be recorded along with what's being said in class. So you'll see everything just like it happened in class.
So here's me coffee and stuff.
Yeah? If you talk back to me, if I ask you questions, you'll hear it. Well, I mean, it depends on how loud you are. But yes, it's all being recorded. Huh?
Did they hear my conversation?
No. I just started it. But be careful what you say. Huh?
Are you recording with the iPad?
Yep.
Like, so, wait, you
Is
can't
it
see
video
it.
or
It's
like?
magic.
They can't see it. But how are you?
Right now, all it is the same thing that's up there. It's just the same thing.
Oh.
It's magic. Okay, we got to go. Okay. Jordan, will you go right around the corner and turn the lights off, please? Okay, so listen, we got to go. We got to finish. So on your graphic organizer, we went through starting with the very most primitive thing that we know about illness and healing and whatever, all the way through the Romans. And when we left off there with the Romans, they had begun to advance. They really were making some progress in understanding illness and healing. And then comes the Dark Ages and the Middle Ages and the things that happened there. Now, the Romans were they were on a roll. And it wasn't just in the field of medicine. It was all the fields. They were very advanced when we left them on that graphic organizer. Unfortunately, during this period of time, they were conquered by a very barbaric type of people called the Huns, who were brutal. And as a result, they started all the studies, but the studies of medicine stopped. Because the Romans then were just trying to survive this attack. And we're talking about a whole entire culture here that started regressing rather than progressing. So all the gain that they had made in the field of medicine, they began to go backwards, which is a shame, because they're going to have to, now they'll get to a point where they have to start all over with what they already knew. So the study of medicine stopped, and they went back to believing that everything was caused by spirits. Now, they went back to praying for healing, which I certainly don't have a problem with. We talked about this yesterday, that most of us, regardless of what our religious preference is, we pray for healing. So they did the same thing. They lost interest in the body. They were just basically under the oppression of the Huns. They were trying to survive. That's all they were trying to do. They just were trying to survive. They didn't have the time or the desire to study and go forward. They just went backwards. No interest. They just prayed. They just prayed for healing. If they took any kind of medicine at all, they went back to using the berries and the leaves and the roots and the things that they knew. That's all they did. So really and truly, everything that they had gained was lost during this period of time. What happened? What's wrong? Huh? I can't hear you. Do you need something? No. Okay. All right. So during this time, this period of time when the bubonic plague, which we've talked about a couple of times, people were dying by the mass, millions, not thousands, guys, millions, tens of millions of people from the plague, from smallpox, and in a few minutes you'll actually see a picture of somebody who has smallpox, from diphtheria, which was a disease that they got from drinking nasty water, and we talked about that when we talked about sanitation, from syphilis. Do you know what syphilis is? Anybody? Nobody knows what syphilis is. Not one person. It's an STD. But here's the thing. Actually, syphilis is still around. It is not the most rampant STD nowadays. It is still around. The thing about syphilis is it's a bacterial infection. So as soon as you recognize something's wrong, you go to the doctor, they give you a simple prescription of penicillin or antibiotic, and it's gone. But back then they didn't have that. What happens with syphilis is it attacks the brain, the nervous system and the brain, and literally makes people go crazy, and then they die. They had hundreds of thousands of, and they didn't know it was sexually transmitted. They didn't know what was causing it. All they knew is people went crazy and then they died. And when I say they went crazy, I'm not kidding you. They lost their mind because the bacteria affected their brain, and then they'd go crazy and then they died. They didn't know where it was coming from. They didn't know how it was spread. They didn't know what to do about it. And they were passing it around. Of course, they had no birth control, no condoms, no nothing. And they were having sex as well. So they were just passing it around. They did not know that's how it was. So it was in epidemic proportion as well. We don't have that now. And tuberculosis. Anybody know what tuberculosis is? What is it?
It's like a disease that attacks the lungs.
The lungs, yes. And again, highly contagious. Highly contagious. You can die from it. Again, now it's not very common that people die from it, but it is very contagious. If a person has it, they generally are quarantined until they can get it under control because it spreads very quickly. There's not a vaccine against it. And a lot of times if you get a job, like if you go apply for a job at McDonald's or any restaurant, you have to have a TB test, tuberculosis TB. And what they do is it's a little round thing that kind of looks like a Coca-Cola cap. Have you had one?
My mom just had one because she's going to a new healthcare company.
Yep.
And it's if you're positive, you break out where it was put in.
What they do is it has, I think, 3 or 4 little prongs on it, kind of like needles, but they're really not. And they prick the skin right there, and it injects. Not a medication. I don't really know exactly what it is. And then you wait, I don't know, a week or how many days, 3 days, 4 days. And then you have to go back and have it checked. And if it looks a certain way, that means you test positive for it. And you can't work around children, people, restaurants, anything, because those are places that it spreads.
Is that the one that they put the bubble in your skin?
It's kind of a bubble.
It
It'll bubble up if you've got it.
Yeah, if you have
Yes.
it. Okay.
Yeah, you have to go back and have it checked. But back then, they didn't have all that stuff, so they didn't know what it was. They might not have even called it, I think they may have called it consumption back then. They even called it something different. But the bottom line is, we're at a time where at the lowest point of civilization whatsoever. You know, not only are they under the oppression of this horrible group of barbaric people, now they've got all this stuff to deal with. And millions of people died, and it completely thinned out the population. So they're at the dark, that's why it's called the Dark Ages. The Middle Ages start to get a little bit better. And then after all the people die, and basically the epidemics are over with, things kind of settle down. And what is the next thing? What is the next age after the Middle Age called, where things begin to get better? Say it. What were you going to say? The Renaissance. The Renaissance. This is where things begin to get so much better. And now comes, and it's not just in the area of medicine. It's art, it's literature, it's education, it's industry, it's trade, it's manufacturing, it's everything. These people now, the ones who survived, basically, they start fresh and new. And there's hope. And it's literally called a rebirth of learning. That's what the Renaissance is. And it happens quickly. all of this progress in all these areas starts very quickly. And we see new science coming out. And they start to go forward in medicine again, which was great because they got to redo. Because remember, all the people who found out the stuff back when we did the graphic organizer, they're all dead. And we don't know. I mean, we're talking hundreds of years later. These people have been without progress for so long, they got to start all over. All over. It would be like with a textbook. If we had the textbook, then all of a sudden it's gone. And I say to you, you're just going to have to start all over figuring out first aid. Or figuring out, you're going to have to do trial and error. You're going to have to figure it out on your own. That's what it would be like. They got to start all over. They got to start all over. But they build universities. They build medical schools. They start doing research. They start publishing books. Like, it's an enlightening to all of them. And people want to learn and they want to progress because progress generally makes our life better, right? Technology has, for the most part, made our life better. So we want that. They start searching again for answers about disease. What causes it? Here's the group of symptoms. Let's give it a name. Find out what caused it. What can we do to fix it? That's where they're headed with all of this. Remember, back before they were conquered by the Huns, their culture said you cannot dissect or cut into a dead body, right? So the only thing they knew was what they could see. Can you imagine the first people who actually cut into a body to see what was in it? I bet you they were scared out of their mind. Because they had no concept of what was in it.
They're probably like, that's what's inside us?
Yes. And they didn't have a name for a heart. They didn't say, oh, that's the liver, or oh, look at the bone. They didn't have any, it was nothing to them. They knew nothing. So as they start to dissect bodies, imagine the learning curve. You know, they start figuring out, this is the heart. It's pumps. There's blood vessels that are connected to it. They start figuring out how it all works together. That's the kind of progress that they made. Publishing books, researching, sending books to each other. Look what I found. Well, look what I found. Look how it's all connected. That's how we do things. We just do it via internet now. Thank goodness. Thank goodness. Back then, if they were going to share books, they put somebody on a camel and sent them for 3 months down the road before they could share books. Thank goodness we don't have to do that, right? After that, we move into centuries. Now, let's think about this as well. When you're talking 16th, 17th centuries, how does that relate to the year? If it's the 16th century, what are the years? If it's the 16th century, what century are we in?
21st.
So is our date 2113? What is it? 20. You go back. The years are in the hundreds behind the century. So if it's the 16th century, it's the 1500s. Still early exploration. The New World, you know, the North and South America have just been discovered. So we're still way back there. So during this time, there were lots, again, it's continual progress. But we have this man who comes on the scene named Leonardo da Vinci. Where have you heard of him? The movie? Yes, actually. But what is he most famous for? What's he? His art. His art. But what people don't realize, he was also a scientist as well. And you probably have seen this picture. Where have you seen this picture? In science. You have seen it in a specific movie. What was the name of it?
Da Vinci Code.
The Da Vinci Code. How many of you saw that or read the book? Okay. And this is called the Vitruvian Man. Now, he did draw this, but he didn't just draw it for art. He drew it as a basis for the way the human body is, the dimensions of the body. Basically, what he figured out, the way that the body is in dimension, you notice there's a square around the body and there's a circle around the body. And you notice where the hands and the feet are? That if your hands are like this, your body should fit in a perfectly square box. If you're like this, it would fit in a perfect, like you wouldn't have to alter. It should be a perfect circle and a perfect square. It was about the dimensions of the body. Now, I can't say for sure right now that all of us would fit in those perfect dimensions anymore. Our bodies, this is how many several thousand years ago? I think our bodies have changed. I'm not positive they would fit that dimension. But that is part of science. Who has biology? Anybody have Miss Kirkley? Okay, I know for a fact, and you probably haven't done it yet, but I know in biology, Miss Kirkley does not an experiment, but a little activity with the Vitruvian Man. Because she and I talked about it before, so I know that she does it. And your other biology teachers may do the same as well. So it is science and it is biology, and that's what because he did more than just art. He's just very well known for the art. But now we start looking at the dimensions of the body, not only what's on the inside as well. And then we move into people who started as a result of dissecting the body. Now we're looking at men and women who actually discovered certain things. Most of them are named after him. You'll see them in a minute. Here comes William Harvey. He figured out that the heart pumps blood and it circulates through all those little vessels. Now, let me say this. I cannot tell you for sure that by this point, the 16th and 17th century, I can't tell you for sure that they could figure this out by a person being alive. I don't know if they figured this out on a corpse, because I don't know that they could use anesthesia, and I don't think that anybody could stand being dissected if they were alive. So how they figured out the heart was pumping and the blood circulates on an alive person, like we can do that today because we can put that person to sleep. I don't know that they could do that. So I don't know how, but he figured it out, which is a good thing.
Probably like punched him or something.
No. All I want you to see is way back in these centuries, these are the things that people were finding out, the progress that was being made. There was a lady, Gabrielle Fallopius. She found the fallopian tubes. What are the fallopian tubes?
The little thing.
Right. They are in and I'm so glad that you weren't afraid to say it. My 4th period class, they knew, but no one would say anything about the reproductive system like it was taboo. You know what? You got to get over that. You know, if we are going to talk about the vagina and a penis, we're going to talk about them, and we're not going to snicker and laugh about it. This is medical skills. They would not even say reproductive system. Yes, they are the tubes that are in the female reproductive system, that your egg comes from the ovary and into the uterus. It's where fertilization takes place, if there are sperm present. She discovered them. They are very tiny, which to me, back then, to have been able to figure that out, they didn't have a microscope. She didn't have a microscope or any of that stuff. They figured that out. That's huge, you know. We got this man whose name is Bartholomew Eustacio. He discovered the little teeny tiny eustachian, and by the way, fallopian, after fallopius, eustachian tubes in your ears. They're tiny little tubes that connect the inside of your eardrum to your basically to your sinuses. You know how when you get a cold and your head is full of mucus and you can't hear out of your ears, it feels like you're hearing through a drum? It's because those tubes are full of mucus. Same thing that's got your whole head snotty, basically. And she found those, or he did, in the ears. Again, all this by dissecting, and then those eustachian tubes are named after him. And then we've got this guy, I'm not going to pretend I know how to say his name. He invented the microscope. Yay. Now what can we see with a microscope? Everything. Bacteria, viruses. We can look at blood cells and tissue cells. Imagine the things. Can you imagine discovering how you could see that and putting a blood cell under there for the first time? Like that would be incredibly exciting if this was your passion. And it was obviously their passion, because this didn't all happen the first time they tried it. He also discovered tooth decay and what caused it. They had tooth decay too. They didn't have Crest and a toothbrush. They didn't go get their teeth cleaned. They had tooth decay. Figured out what caused it. Now, whether or not he invented the toothbrush to go along with that, I don't know. Maybe he did. But I want you to see, and obviously we're not going to go over everybody that discovered every little thing. I just want you to see the kind of progress that was made. This word is apothecary. This is when they first started having a, quote, if you will, drugstore. It wasn't really a drugstore or a pharmacy. It was called an apothecary. But what happened is, remember, they had berries and roots and leaves and bark from trees that they knew what they would do. And so they put it all together. I'll give you a good example. It's a kind of a weak example, but it works. Do you remember on Hunger Games? Do you remember what Katniss's mother did to make a living? What did she do? She what? She did medicine. She had the bark of trees and the berries, and people would come to her. Instead of going out and getting it themselves, they came to her. This was an early form of an apothecary, which is like a drugstore. That's what they called it. Not a drugstore, not a pharmacy. It was an apothecary. And so this is the beginning of what that was, which is, again, it's progress. Just like the hospitals, was it the Greek or the Romans? Romans, who had hospitals. Now we got drugstores. And lastly, the 18th century, what would be the years? 1700s. We got medical schools. You go to classes to learn. You do internships. That means you work under a doctor for so many years in the 18th century. So that's the 1700s. So we've been doing that for a lot of years. A lot of years. They continued to dissect bodies. And by the way, whose bodies did they dissect? Okay, you do realize that sometimes family members will donate, like if a loved one dies, they will donate their body to science. Did you know that people do that? And they actually send those bodies like to Gainesville or to USF, and they use those bodies in their medical school classes to learn from. Also, anybody ever go to Mosey and see the bodies exhibit? Okay, I don't know if you read on there or you just looked, but if you read, a lot of bodies that they use for dissecting and for science, to study science, a lot of those people were homeless. And no one claimed, like they'd find a homeless guy dead, and no one claimed the body at all. And they generally advertise, and they'd put the picture out in the newspaper for like 7 days and say, if this is, if you know this person or if you're the next of kin, we need you to claim the body. No one claims the body. So you assume there is no family. They donate those bodies to science. And that's what we use for learning, especially if a person has a disease that they are looking for a cure for whatever they've got. A lot of times they'll donate the body. I mean, what else? You got two choices. You can bury it and it's good for nothing, the body, or you can cremate it and it's good for nothing, or you can donate it and at least maybe find what caused whatever it is. And that's how we learn. That's how we advance. And if people didn't do that, we wouldn't know half of what we know now. Kayla?
But in the end, will they, have you buried?
Probably when they're finished with the body, they'll cremate it. Because the body itself doesn't last all that long.
And then don't they do, transplants?
That has to be done, within a couple of hours of death. So, yes, if you are an organ donor, as soon as you die, as a matter of fact, a lot of times if they know that you're brain dead and you're on life support, sometimes they just keep you on life support long enough to what we call harvest your organs. Because if you die and the blood flow stops to them, they may not be good. They may not be good to donate. So they have to keep the body alive long enough to harvest the organs, and then they take you off life support. That's if you're a donor. So, yeah. So that's how we learn. Yay For the first time in the United States, we have a female doctor. Why is this huge? Elizabeth Blackwell. Why? Why is this huge? Why?
Because normally those things around any of these times, they would seem more like something men would be knowing when it didn't have many brothers.
Absolutely. Women did not have, most of the time they couldn't even go to school. Most of the time they could not even go to school, let alone be a doctor. So yay for women. And it was not just this. They couldn't be lawyers. Most of the time they couldn't, they had no rights whatsoever. So yay for the first woman doctor. And then comes the invention of the stethoscope. What's a stethoscope do? Here's your heart. So what did they do before to hear your heart? Put their ear to the chest. Could be a little awkward sometimes. Yay for the stethoscope.
But can't you also hear when people breathe if they have
In the lungs, absolutely. And unfortunately, you can't hear that with the ear. Can't hear that. And then, I totally don't get this. And guys, I'm running through this really quickly. I totally don't get chemistry. I'm just going to tell you straight up right now. I almost failed it. I just don't get it. The discovery of the element of oxygen, which is huge because we know you can't live without oxygen. But how in the world someone discovers the element of a gas like that, I don't get it. It does not calculate in my... You're going to have to take chemistry. You're going to see what I'm talking about one day. I don't get it. I like things that are concrete, like things that you can see. And sometimes I have a little bit of trouble when you can't. How do you discover something you can't see? I don't know. Thank goodness they did. And that applies to medicine because now we know the body has to have it, right? So yay for whoever did that. And then comes old Ben Franklin. You know who Ben Franklin is, right? I'm not talking about Benjamin Franklin Plumbing Company that you see, but yeah. Okay? As he did all kinds of things, really. He made the first glasses, but he also made the first bifocal. You know what a bifocal is, right? 2 different lenses in the glass. I personally have far bypassed that. I have 3 lenses. I have trifocals because I can't see anything. But he invented bifocals, which was great. That means the top part you can see at a distance, and the bottom part you can see to read, which is why sometimes when I'm looking at the paper, I have no idea what it says. He also figured out that coals, because he was a scientist as well, not just with electricity and those kinds of things. I think he also made, if I'm not mistaken, the first false teeth for people who were missing teeth. I'm pretty sure he did. That coals could be passed from person to person, like by coughing, sneezing, hands, things like that. So we're up to the 18th century, and then and this guy, this was the first vaccine against smallpox, and unfortunately, it worked, but he died because he made a mistake as he did it, and he got smallpox and died. If I'm not mistaken, I think he's the one. But he did it. Smallpox actually originally smallpox was in cows. He made the vaccine. He gave it to a child, and somehow in the process, I'll have to go back and reread the story. I have it somewhere. Somehow he infected himself and he died of the very thing that he created the vaccine. We do because we give it to children to keep them from, again, it might have made sense back then to give it to an adult, but I don't know. I forget all the details, but I'll look that up. So, and this is a picture that I told you about. You can't really see it really well if you could look right here. Basically, they are huge pockets of nasty, infected pus all over. I know. But I'm just saying, because some people have no idea what it looks like, and you need to be educated. That's what we're doing here. So we're up to the 18th century. Tomorrow we're going to do the 19th and 20th century.